Have you ever experienced that unsettling feeling when interacting with someone? That gut instinct warning you that something's deeply wrong, even when you can't identify exactly what it is. Carl Jung, one of history's most insightful psychologists, dedicated his life to understanding these very moments. Through decades of clinical observation, he discovered something remarkable. There are hidden signals that reveal psychological dangers far more threatening than any obvious red flag. These warning signs don't broadcast themselves through hostile words or clear destructive behavior. They work beneath the radar, and it's precisely their hidden nature that makes them infinitely more dangerous. What's particularly unsettling is that these signals frequently emerge in people who appear perfectly normal, even appealing or magnetic. While ancient wisdom traditions sensed these patterns, Jung provided us with the psychological tools to recognize them. Once you learn to recognize these 5 warning signs, you'll know exactly when it's crucial to distance yourself from someone. Let's dive into the first and perhaps most prevalent of these dangerous signals. Picture this situation. You're in conversation with someone who suddenly assigns thoughts, motives, or harmful qualities to you that you never expressed or displayed. It's disturbing because they're not responding to the real you, but to a twisted version they've constructed in their mind. Does this sound familiar? What you're witnessing is shadow projection in its most dangerous form. Jung's shadow represents everything we deny about ourselves, qualities we find intolerable and banished to our unconscious. But these rejected elements don't simply disappear. They gather power in the hidden depths of our psyche, demanding expression. When someone habitually projects their shadow onto you, they're displaying one of the most dangerous psychological patterns Jung ever identified: the total inability to acknowledge their own denied aspects. The danger intensifies because, from their viewpoint, you genuinely embody those negative traits. They're not deliberately deceiving. They actually perceive in you what they refuse to accept in themselves. This distorted perception creates a specific type of certainty that can be extraordinarily convincing. The projecting person can even persuade others that you are exactly as they portray you. Modern psychology validates Jung's insights. Our minds literally restructure reality to support our existing beliefs. But with massive shadow projection, this filter becomes a complete warping of truth. The danger signal emerges when you notice a stark contradiction between someone's accusations about your intentions and your genuine inner experience. They blame you with unwavering certainty, seemingly resistant to any evidence to the contrary. What's actually occurring? You've accidentally become the arena for their internal battle against parts of themselves they cannot confront. The second dangerous sign Jung discovered manifests through a disturbing blend of moral conviction and unshakable sense of mission. This psychological pattern is especially treacherous because it disguises itself as insight or moral authority, rather than revealing the threat it actually represents. Jung called this phenomenon psychic inflation, a condition where someone's sense of self expands beyond normal human limits. What makes this warning sign so hard to spot is that it often presents as conviction rather than confusion, as power rather than vulnerability. You'll identify this pattern when you meet someone who declares absolute certainty about complex moral or spiritual questions. They don't merely maintain strong beliefs. They present themselves as direct conduits of truth or righteousness. Their words allow no space for uncertainty, questioning, or the natural boundaries of human knowledge. This transcends ordinary confidence or expertise. While healthy confidence recognizes limits and stays open to correction, inflation builds a psychological fortress immune to new information. As Swiss analyst Marie-Louise von Franz observed, this state paradoxically combines grandiosity with a strange loss of individuality. The person becomes a vessel for abstract principles rather than a complex human being. The psychological process involves a fusion between the limited human ego and universal archetypal forces. particularly those connected to wisdom, justice, or spiritual understanding. The person unconsciously merges with these larger-than-life patterns, experiencing themselves as an embodiment of cosmic powers rather than as one viewpoint among many. Spiritual traditions across cultures recognize this threat. German mystic Meister Eckhart identified it as the most subtle snare on the spiritual journey. Zen traditions labeled it Zen sickness, while Sufis described the veil of light, more perilous than the veil of darkness because it's harder to recognize as an obstruction. The unmistakable indicator? This person never questions their own motives. While history's greatest sages expressed profound humility before life's mysteries, those suffering from psychic inflation display absolute certainty. They don't entertain the possibility of error because in their perception, they're conveying universal truths, not personal viewpoints. What makes this condition particularly dangerous is its magnetic appeal. Jung noted how leaders with severe psychic inflation drew devoted followers precisely because of the total conviction they projected. This certainty feeds our human hunger for security and clear answers in an uncertain world. You can spot ego inflation by watching how someone handles disagreement. The inflated ego doesn't process questioning as valuable feedback, but as an attack on the cosmic order itself. They interpret opposition not as legitimate human difference, but as resistance to the good, truth, or divine that they embody. Have you ever encountered someone who seemed excessively perfect, too refined in every social interaction? Jung recognized this as a serious warning sign. When someone exhibits a social mask so flawless that it lacks any natural human inconsistency or authenticity. The persona, Jung's term for our social face, becomes dangerous when it never falters, never reveals the messy humanity beneath. This excessive perfection signals a grave psychological threat, the complete divorce between outer presentation and inner truth. The person has become so committed to their social image that they've lost connection with their genuine self. Swiss psychoanalyst Guggenbühl Craig termed this the emptiness behind the mask, where someone has constructed such a compelling exterior that even they begin to lose sight of the distinction between their performance and their reality. The warning sign appears when you sense a peculiar artificiality with someone. Their behavior is technically perfect. They always know the right words, the appropriate actions, the correct facial expressions, yet it lacks the natural contradictions of authentic humanity. Modern neuroscience provides compelling evidence for Jung's observations. Our brains contain mirror neurons that detect subtle mismatches between verbal, facial, and physical expressions. When someone's social mask is completely detached from their inner reality, these neurons trigger a warning signal we experience as unexplainable discomfort or mistrust. The real threat lies in what this extreme separation conceals. When someone channels all their psychological energy into maintaining a flawless external image, the rejected aspects don't vanish. They accumulate in the unconscious, forming what Jung called the shadow. And the more rigid the persona, the more chaotic and potentially destructive their shadow becomes when it inevitably surfaces. Marie-Louise von Franz, Jung's close colleague, noticed that those presenting perfect social adaptation often experience shadow eruptions, moments where all suppressed energy explodes in unpredictable ways. This dynamic explains why the seemingly most perfect people can sometimes commit surprisingly destructive acts. If you've found value in understanding these psychological patterns so far, consider subscribing to this channel. We regularly explore the depths of human psychology and how it affects our daily relationships. Now, let's get back to the video. You've probably witnessed this disturbing phenomenon. Mid-conversation, someone undergoes a subtle shift. Their physical appearance remains unchanged, but suddenly their voice carries a different quality, their eyes hold an unusual intensity, and their entire presence transforms. It's as if another power has temporarily seized control of their personality. Jung identified this alarming pattern and labeled it archetypal possession, when unconscious primordial forces overwhelm a person's normal identity. This might be the most disturbing psychological warning sign we can encounter in everyday interactions. In Jung's understanding, archetypes function as universal psychological blueprints that shape human experience across all cultures. These powerful forces normally operate beneficially below conscious awareness. However, when one archetype completely dominates consciousness, the individual's unique personality becomes buried beneath these transpersonal energies, creating a psychological disturbance that impacts everyone around them. Shamanic traditions clearly understood this phenomenon. Anthropologist Mircea Eliade documented how shamans distinguished between controlled states of channeling and dangerous states of possession, where individual identity was completely overwhelmed. Christian mysticism spoke of discernment of spirits as the crucial ability to differentiate beneficial psychic influences from potentially harmful ones. The warning sign manifests when you notice someone has lost normal psychological adaptability, becoming rigidly identified with a single archetypal pattern. The unquestionable savior, the relentless warrior, the eternal victim, the infallible judge. The specific archetype matters less than the complete identification with it. Revealing signs include a strange intensity in the eyes, a monolithic quality in speech, and a peculiar sense that the person is no longer fully present in the ordinary sense. As Jungian analyst Robert Moore observed, you're no longer relating to a complete human personality, but to an archetypal fragment that has taken control of consciousness. What makes this particularly dangerous is that the person possessed by an archetype experiences an extraordinary sense of certainty and purpose. The ambiguity of normal consciousness vanishes, replaced by absolute conviction that can be extremely persuasive to others. Jung observed how political and religious leaders in states of archetypal possession could ignite mass movements precisely because of this superhuman certainty. The fundamental threat lies in the fact that archetypes contain extreme opposites. The same archetype of the savior contains both the potential for redemptive compassion and destructive fanaticism. When someone becomes completely identified with an archetype, they inevitably express its darkest aspects, often without any awareness of the contradiction. Jung identified a particularly disturbing warning sign that appears as an eerie form of psychological repetition. It's the strange phenomenon where someone continuously recreates identical painful situations throughout their life. Different locations, different people, but somehow the same distressing outcome occurs with remarkable consistency. When someone repeatedly recreates identical painful scenarios across different relationships and situations, you're observing a powerful unconscious force in action. The real danger emerges when you begin to feel strangely scripted in your interactions with them, as if you're being pushed to play a specific role in their recurring drama. The first time is chance, the second time is coincidence, the third time is a pattern, as the saying goes. Jung understood that these patterns reveal unhealed psychological wounds, seeking resolution through repetition. The person doesn't consciously choose these painful cycles. They're driven by unconscious material that operates beyond their awareness or control. Psychotherapist Bessel van der Kolk describes this as the body keeping the score, where unprocessed experiences create persistent templates that filter and shape new encounters. Early formative relationships and experiences become the invisible blueprint for future connections, often with disturbing precision. You can recognize this warning sign when you notice someone expressing genuine confusion at their horrible luck while describing essentially identical relationship dynamics with different people. They might say things like, "I always attract manipulative partners," or "people never value what I bring," yet remain blind to their own role in selecting and maintaining these situations. Brain research provides fascinating insight into this mechanism. Neuroplasticity researcher Norman Doidge explains how neural circuits formed during significant experiences become self-reinforcing over time. The brain literally becomes programmed to perceive, interpret, and respond along familiar pathways, even when these pathways lead to suffering. What makes this pattern particularly hazardous in relationships is its magnetic pull. Without conscious awareness, someone caught in these loops broadcasts subtle signals that invite precisely the responses needed to complete their familiar story. Psychiatrist Mark Epstein calls this the trauma magnet, where we unconsciously arrange circumstances to confirm our deepest, often painful, beliefs about ourselves and others. Before you realize it, you might find yourself acting in ways that are uncharacteristic, but somehow feel unavoidable with this person. That disturbing feeling indicates you've been drawn into someone else's unresolved psychological territory, a clear signal to step back and reassess the relationship dynamic. If these 5 warning signs reveal the deepest psychological dangers, according to Jung, there is a transformative path that transcends these threats: the conscious integration of the shadow. This process represents the fundamental difference between psychologically dangerous people and those embarking on the journey toward psychic wholeness. Shadow integration doesn't mean moral perfection or absence of negative aspects. On the contrary, it implies a humble recognition of our own capacity for all the errors and darkness we observe in others. As Jung expressed, "I would rather be whole than good," a frequently misunderstood phrase that points to the difference between authentic psychological integrity and a mask of perfection hiding dangerous internal divisions. The indicators of someone who has genuinely begun this integration process are unmistakable. A unique combination of honesty about their own shadows and compassion toward the shadows of others. This person can acknowledge their problematic impulses without excessive shame or self-indulgence, simply as aspects of the human condition requiring constant awareness. What's truly transformative about this process is that paradoxically, consciously recognizing our most difficult aspects dramatically decreases the likelihood of unconsciously acting them out. As Jungian analyst Robert Johnson observed, what we deny does not disappear. It simply emerges in forms over which we have less control. Before we part ways, reflect on this. Have you recognized any of these warning signs in important people in your life? Or perhaps more crucially, have you detected aspects of these patterns in yourself? Awareness is the first step toward transformation. The journey to psychological wholeness begins with recognizing these unconscious forces that shape our relationships and our lives. Remember, Jung didn't identify these patterns to make us fearful, but to illuminate the path toward greater consciousness. By learning to recognize these warning signs, we gain not just protection from psychological danger, but the opportunity to transform our own shadows into sources of wisdom and creativity.